happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. And this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm, I'm your host, Norm, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight in the Nook at the Epicurean with Mary Kay Lombino.
Hi, Norm. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday. Thanks for coming. What a treat.
Oh, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have you here because amongst other things, which are very interesting to me, your other jobs, you were running for school board here in Rhinebeck.
I am.
That's very interesting. And the election is coming up pretty soon.
May 17th. I'll keep repeating that during this whole hour. May 17th, 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the middle school.
At the middle school.
Yeah.
So it's not at the usual voting places.
No, and you can't vote early in the morning. So for people who are used to voting in local elections, this is a little different. You have to go to the school in the afternoon or evening.
Huh. And what's the date again?
May 17th.
What
2
hours?
p.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, and where?
At the middle school.
Good. I'll keep asking.
Yeah.
Well, I have one question for you. And if you answer correctly, you totally get my vote for school board. Ready? The International Monetary Fund has identified a debt repayment obligations as one of the most serious hobbles to the health and viability of developing countries in the third world. If you're elected to if you're elected to the school board, what will you do about that?
Yeah, well, that will not be my area.
Oh, cop out.
Because I think the committee that I'd like to join is more the strategic planning committee, not the budgeting committee.
Oh, so there's different committees on the school board?
There are.
I see.
Not as many as there used to be. There's only 3, so I have not that many choices.
And what are the 3? Budget, strategic planning, and
one other.
And one other.
The other one.
And that other one, which is I'll be in the other one someday if I ever. No, I don't think I would have the patience for that.
But you should think about running. I think that anybody who's part of this community should think about running because our schools are great, and if you've got ideas and you've got a sort of impulse to give back, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving back is so nice. So you have 1 or 2 kids in the
I have
school, one kid in the school district.
Yep, Ezra. He is a 10th grader.
Oh, good. 10th grade, he gads.
10th grade.
And how long has he been in the district?
Since he was in kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was born right here in Rhinebeck at the birthing center.
Oh, the New Garden Birthing Center.
Yes.
My boy Moss was born there.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, in a birthing tub.
Yeah. They have those there. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was just amazing. And he was our 3rd kid. And when the doula came in and said, "Oh, your tub is ready," and Andrea was she's like, "Oh, it looks really painful." I thought, "Oh, hot bath. That seems like
just." You thought it was for you?
Of course, at first I did, but then I thought, that's probably just the ticket.
It was quite nice.
Ezra was born in the tub?
I was really excited about the tub, but the day that Ezra was born, there were so many babies being born that the tubs were kind of occupied by other moms.
Right.
So I used the hot shower instead, but that was like
That sounds pretty good too.
Pretty good. Yes.
I didn't know that was one of the options.
Yeah.
But back to the school board thing. Ezra, born here in Rhinebeck.
Yep.
So you've been here that whole time, and now he's in 10th grade.
Yeah.
Which is what, 15, 16?
It's been 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an amazing community. I'm so glad. I mean, we didn't really move here for the schools, but as soon as we got here and started to recognize how great the schools were, we were so happy that we made it here.
And I'm guessing you moved here because I looked at your LinkedIn life, your sort of resume there, for the job at Vassar.
That's right. Yep. We moved here from Los Angeles, even though I'm a New Yorker. I'd been out there for a bit of time going to school and working for jobs and things like that. But I was wanting to move back to New York, and the Vassar job came up, so it was a perfect ticket.
What a treat. Well, I'm so glad that you're here. But let's get back to the school board. You said you want to give back, which is a wonderful impulse. What other thoughts made you think, school board, that's the place where I'm going to do the giving back?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was partially because I have some experience with boards and with education and with nonprofits. So it seemed to me that the place I could give back most sort of successfully would be on the board. That, and also, the new superintendent has done such amazing things. And then he recently hired a new person who's like the assistant superintendent. And the two of them are kind of the dream team. And I think as a board member, you get to work with them. And that excited me. That just, that makes me feel like I really want to help them do what they want to do.
And what is it that they want to do?
So, it's the core mission of the school, basically, is to teach and improve the schools. Rhinebeck is a great district, and it has a great reputation. For a long time, it had the best reputation. Like, Rhinebeck is the best school around. And now, as I heard, that it has a reputation that teachers get paid the most, which is great.
Sure.
Or that it's a high-paying job, which is fantastic.
Which is nice.
But I think they're also wanting to make other improvements that they just haven't had a chance to do in a while.
And what are some of those improvements?
Well, they want to enhance the way that students learn, make it a little bit less formal. So have, like, in the high school, for instance, they mentioned something about having a lounge. I had a lounge in my high school. It wasn't really where we did a lot of work, but I have a feeling that the Rhinebeck kids would really use it to, like, have study groups together. That's just one tiny example. I think other ways are being more sustainable. So looking at the fact that climate change is real, and if that's a political statement, I don't know if it is or not, but
not here in this booth, it's not.
Okay, good. So anyway, to be more sustainable and to think ahead so that they can do sort of much more long-range planning rather than kind of piecing things together. I think improving the curriculum and really get students ready for whatever their future might be, whether it's college or another kind of career. Let's see, what else? Really supporting teachers, administrators, students. Everyone's had a really rough couple years. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think just recognizing that, seeing what we lost, seeing what we missed during that time that everyone was struggling, seeing where the struggles still exist, and really trying to put some energy and resources there.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things I read maybe halfway through the couple of years of big pandemic trouble was that kids who were not in school they were catching up on the schoolwork. They weren't catching up on social skills.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot imagine being, like, in middle school or even a little kid and not seeing your friends for months on end. And even when you did, your face was covered. And I know my kid started ninth grade after being home for a year. Ninth grade was the year that he was home for a year. Then he started 10th grade and said, I feel like I just started high school. So it's like he missed a year, even though, sure, he was doing work on his screen, but I think the social end of it was just lost.
And I'm just wondering out loud if what the district is doing, what the teachers, the administration is doing to help kids get up to speed, so to speak, socially. That seems like a hard thing to create.
It is. And I think they're putting a lot of energy towards it. They got some funding. A lot of schools got funding that would help with this. They're recognizing what those social sort of gaps are.
Right.
I don't know the details about how they're doing that, but I know they're hiring another counselor, I believe.
Oh, that's nice.
Putting more time and energy into finding out what it is that kids lost, and then sort of figuring out how they'll address that.
Right. And they're getting funding from a bunch of places, probably the state, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And also, I'm just going to do a plug here.
Yeah.
Because I know when the pandemic hit, everybody had a computer. If they didn't have a computer, the district got them a computer. And that's partly through the largesse of the Rhinebeck Science Foundation.
100%. I mean, that is so amazing.
And the other guy who's running for school board, Steve Jenkins.
Yeah. And he was instrumental in that.
Yeah.
And he helped negotiate, I think, the way that all went down. And had it not been for Rhinebeck's Science Foundation, Steve working closely with the then superintendent, all of that would have maybe not happened. So it's huge. When I tell people in other districts that our kids all got laptops,
right,
and that the little kids got iPads, they're just like, wait, what? How did you do that? And it's parents. Parents are the Rhinebeck Science Foundation. So that's another reason why, like, as a parent, I just feel like the school needs my help.
Right. And let me just harp on this a second. What a feather in his cap, this Steve Jenkins guy,
Yes,
to have been instrumental in helping make that happen.
And that's sort of what Steve does. He's a really good negotiator. He's brilliant with budgets. So you can ask him the budget question, the long one that I didn't really understand that you asked me at the beginning. He knows all of that. He also has this experience because he's been on the board for a while.
Right.
And the board and the superintendent has had a lot of change recently. So we need that continuity. So we definitely need Steve. So vote for Steve Jenkins.
So he's the organizational memory, the institutional memory.
That's right.
And you are running with a woman named Juliette Gorman.
That's right.
And how did you decide to sort of make your campaigns together?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of lucked out in meeting one another because we didn't actually know each other before this. And Sarah Rosenthal, popularly known as Rosie, everyone knows her as Rosie, and she knew both of us, and she knew that we were both thinking of running. And so she introduced me to Juliette, and we just sat down and talked. And as soon as we started talking, we were super excited because we realized that we both have a lot of sort of complementary skills and experiences, but really aligned in terms of our goals for the board and why we want to join the board. So that's when we decided, it would kind of make sense to pool our energy and run together as a team. And that's what we're doing. Which
is great. And certainly, economically smart. And Steve Jenkins, did you not know him at the time?
I didn't. We've since met him. We sat down, had a long talk with him, and now we're kind of on an email chain about, he keeps us up to date as to what's happening so that, let's say we are lucky enough to get elected. When we show up to our first meeting, we're not in the dark about what's happening.
Right. That's spectacular. Well, I'm knocking on wood. I hope you both get elected.
Thank you.
And there's a Meet the Candidates thing this coming Monday, I believe.
Right. Yes. So this is wonderful, too. Again, a parent group, the PTSO, organized this for us. They hadn't done that in the past, as far as I know, but not many Rhinebeck School Board elections have been contested. There are actually 4 candidates and there's 3 slots. So I think people really want to know who to vote for. And in order to do that, I think the best way to do that is face-to-face, right? So they can come to the school on Monday, 7 o'clock, and we'll each chat a little bit about ourselves. And then it's going to be totally open to questions. So anybody can ask anything and we'll try to address those questions.
Great. And you guys are going to be at the farmers market also on Sunday, weather permitting?
Yeah. Well, no, even if it's raining.
Okay.
Farmers market's always rain or shine. And it's Mother's Day. So Juliette and I thought, what a good day for 2 moms to get out there and talk about how much they care about the schools.
That's great. And you'll have a little table sort of by the exit, I'm guessing, where people are usually campaigning, the campaign spot.
The campaign spot. And, we just signed up and decided that would be the perfect day for us to hand out some flyers. We'll have some information. And again, anyone can just come up and ask us questions and just meet us so that they kind of put a face with the name.
And have people been doing that already? Like stopping you in the supermarket saying, hey, I know you.
Yeah.
Tell me about the International Monetary Fund.
Right. Well, we've actually been knocking on some doors too, which is really fun. You live in a small town, you think you know everybody, but you don't. So you go and you knock on someone's door and you realize, oh, you've lived here for 15 years, so have I. We've never met, but here we are getting to meet one another.
It's
so that's been fun.
mind-boggling the way that can happen.
Yeah.
A few doors down, I'm like, who's that? I've never seen them before. And somebody's
Exactly.
like, they've lived there the whole time.
I know. It's funny. Small towns have small pockets, and I think that kind of can segregate us. But this has actually given me the chance to meet a whole bunch of people that I never knew before.
And how's that going? Are most people pretty receptive? Did you get any doors slammed in your face?
No doors slammed, luckily. Everyone's been pretty friendly. And, it's mostly informational, and people didn't really know when to vote. May 17th, by the way.
Oh, is it?
2 to 9.
Oh, where does that happen?
At the middle school.
Oh, right.
They don't know when to vote. They don't know sort of that much about it. They want to know also about the budget, because on the same night as the Board of Ed election is also an opportunity to vote on the budget. So we're really in favor of voting yes on the budget. And the cool thing is this year it's pretty far below the tax cap. So the tax cap is a rule that they put into place to make sure that it didn't sort of creep up too fast and too far.
Right.
And this year we're pretty far below it. We're at 1.69 and the tax cap is 3.2.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So are there controversial items in the budget?
No, it's just school budgeting. It's actually pretty boring, I think, but it's important. So this year, the budget hovers right around 37 million, and that's a little bit of a jump from last year, but there was a whole period when not everybody was coming to school, right? So they didn't have to turn on the lights. There was a lot of savings there. So it probably looks a lot more like there's a bigger jump from last year than there really is. You look back 2 years, there's barely much of a jump, and it really just accounts for things like inflation.
And how's overall enrollment doing in the district?
So it's interesting because we were on a real decline. The enrollment is sort of inching down and down and down over the last few years. And if you look ahead at projections, it looks as though that's going to continue. We did have a little uptick during the COVID year and a half, I guess you would say, where people were moving here, and people were moving here for the schools. A lot of the schools in New York were not having any in-person. And by the way, CLS was able to get in-person schools 5 days a week during the pandemic. Many schools didn't even come close to that.
Yeah.
And the upper schools were there at least 3 days a week. So people moved here for the schools during 2020 and for other reasons. They didn't have to be at work every day. We know that whole story. But so there was an uptick, but I don't think it's probably going to last long enough to make a big impact on the decline of enrollment.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because I guess the last I heard anything about enrollment was during the pandemic. It's like, oh, people are coming, the enrollment's going up.
Yeah.
I mean, if enrollment keeps going down, that's not good.
It's not. There are ways to consolidate resources when you have less families moving here or less families having kids here. And I think that's one of the things that the school would really like to do, is really roll up their sleeves and come up with a long-term plan on how to address declining enrollment.
Because the budget, I'm guessing, is sort of attached to enrollment in some way?
Yes. Yeah, it will be affected. And, there might be some savings if, let's say, there's fewer sections in certain grades, then there could be savings there. But how do you allocate those resources is a big question that takes a lot of planning.
And the declining enrollment here, does that sort of mirror a nationwide decline in public school enrollment?
Yes, it does.
Huh.
But they're looking specifically in the state. There's, New York State has a pretty steady decline. And then they also look at birth rates. But that's not always totally accurate, because we just talked about the birthing center, how wonderful it is. People come from across the river and have their babies here, and we don't always know exactly how that's going to affect.
We were living in Woodstock at the time.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You're an example. Yep. So the birth rate is not exactly mapped on to how our schools will see enrollment in the next, the coming years.
Right. Yeah, we moved here for the schools, and they were great by the state numbers. And great by the anecdotes, and now got 3 kids who graduated, and they were great in reality.
Yeah.
They were really, really lovely.
So they had good experiences in the school.
They did.
Yeah. My son has too. I mean, I am so impressed by the teachers and the administrators, the buildings, the enhancements, the after-school programs. It's all been a really positive experience for our family. So that's another reason why I really feel the desire to give back and to help out.
All right. Well, thank you in advance for working towards that end.
Thanks.
And I think maybe now is the time in the show to share the cocktail. You brought a special cocktail for us.
I did. And I will just shout out to my husband, Eric Steinman, who's the person who made these cocktails.
I'm sorry, what's his name again?
Eric Steinman. Yeah. Hi, Eric. And thanks for making these yummy cocktails. So he knows that French 75 is sort of like my drink, and that is a wonderful drink. It's like gin, lemon, simple syrup, and Prosecco or champagne.
Yeah.
So this is a slight variation on that, and it's called the Fresh 55 because it's very fresh and because I'm 55.
Oh.
That's also the speed limit, just so you know.
A recent birthday?
Not that recent, actually. I'm a Capricorn, so it's been a couple months.
Now, do you put any stock in that stuff?
I do.
You do?
Yes.
So, I mean, how much stock? Did you look this up? I'm going on the radio thing and
no.
we see if the
No, I'm more of
I
check in with my astrologer every 2 to 3 years or so. Just
I see.
To make sure I'm on track.
So that
Again,
really
it's long-range
dimensionalizes
planning.
exactly how much stock. All right. Well, let's have this thing. You brought champagne, or
Yeah, so the variation is that it's made with Myer lemons, which
Yum.
are extra delicious.
yeah, a little
so
bit milder, not quite as tart.
Exactly.
So you don't
Not
need
as
as
tart.
much simple syrup, I'm guessing.
Right. So I'm going to shake them up.
Yay!
so good,
What a
doesn't it?
delightful sound. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Let me know if I can help with anything.
maybe if
that is
you
a
can
gorgeous
start there.
shaker. Okay.
I'll pop open these little slivers of lemon that Eric packed for us.
Thank you, Eric. So is this it all mixed up? Are you putting a little champagne on top of
The
that?
champagne's going to go on top. Yeah.
Okay.
You can't hear it, but there's lemons plopping into the glass. It's that
All right.
plop, plop, fizz, fizz sound. Thank you for the sound
Yeah.
effects. Okay, should I open the bubbly?
If you want.
I'm gonna
It's
try.
your cocktail.
I'll try
I'm
not
just appreciative.
to poke out any eyes when I do this.
Oh, geez.
No,
well, here, put this thing on
I
top
will.
of it. Yeah. Hey, there's Tallulah Patch.
Oh my.
Hi, T. How are you?
Tallulah.
Oh, my goodness. Local celebrity,
Tallulah, vote
Patch.
for me in the school board. See? She's excited that I'm running.
Oh, good. Who isn't? I was excited to hear that.
That's nice.
So while you're opening that, I'm going to say, again, this Monday is a Meet the Candidates thing.
Yep.
Which is great because people can go, they can listen to what everybody says, they can ask questions, they can sort of clarify
Yeah.
Their support for
Ready? Oh, there it
you
goes.
and Juliet and Steve.
Yeah, we'll all be there. And I think that if you are interested in asking a question, you can actually email the PTSO in advance, or you
and
can
they're
also just...
And they're choosing, they're sort of screening
Yeah,
the
in
questions.
case there's too many questions, they might filter it a little bit, or if there's overlap, people ask the
Okay.
same question over and over again.
Right.
Like that one you asked me, everyone's going to ask
Everybody's
that,
going to ask that. I hope. This is my dream. On Monday, everybody asks you about the IMF
Yes, exactly.
and developing country debt. Okay, well,
All right, let's pour.
Okay. How are you doing? I'll pull the microphone out of your way.
Perfect.
Oh, that looks so good.
It does. Yum.
Well, cheers.
Cheers to you.
Congratulations for figuring out that you want to give back in this way.
Thank you.
I mean, it's such a treat to, I think, to understand how you want to give back, and hats off to you for that.
Thanks.
And to your success. Oh, that is delicious. That's
It's
so
so
good. Thank you, Eric Steinman. All right. Well, what questions have I not asked you about the school board stuff?
Well, let's see. Maybe about my background. So the kind of school that I went to.
Okay.
I'm a product of public school.
And that you said that was East Coast somewhere?
It was actually in a small town in New York State.
Oh.
Not that different from Rhinebeck. And so, I have a lot of experience with that, and I didn't realize it, but it really gave me like a passion for public school. And I have a lot of friends who went to private school too, and we share experiences. And, I think that there's both good and bad, but I'm passionate about the fact that we need to make our public schools work for everybody, because not everyone has the option of doing private school. And I just really believe in the fact that public schools should be available and accessible and good.
And where was this small town?
So it's called Rye, New York.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to RHS, not Rhinebeck High School, but Rye High School. And Rye is quite different now than it was back then. But when I went there, it was very similar to Rhinebeck. Small town, a lot of families knew one another. You would know your friends and your friends' siblings and your friends' parents. And there was a real tightly knit community there. And it was also kind of in the orbit of New York City, even though it's much closer. I think the orbit grew since then. So it has a little bit of influence of that. And, I'm New York proud. So there's a little
great.
bit of that too.
Yeah. Huh. And so you graduated from Rye High School once upon a time, and then you went where for college?
I went to University of Richmond in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I loved it, loved it. It was just so nice to be in the South, even though I didn't really know much about the South. I just wanted to get out of the cold weather.
Really?
And now I'm back in upstate, so that didn't last that long.
That was a big part of the decision?
It was, yeah.
But you studied, what'd you study there? You must have looked into the programs. And
I did.
Thought,
so they have a really strong art history program, and that was my passion. So I was interested in that.
So talk to me about because I had the same thing. I went from Cincinnati, Ohio to SMU in Dallas, Texas for college, where I landed in 1978. And I was like, oh my, and I was there like a week before somebody said, what do you know? You're just a Yankee. And I was like, what? What are you even talking about? And I'm wondering what kinds of experiences you had.
Yeah. There was a little bit of that.
Yankee in the South.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, although there were a lot of Northeasterners at Richmond. But I did have a roommate whose name was Mary Curtis Mead, and she looked at my name, Mary Kay, and she just assumed that I was going to be from the South because it kind of sounds Southern, and she was a Mary Curtis, and so...
But the name ending in a vowel, maybe.
Yeah, and then the Lombino might have thrown
yeah.
her, but she didn't really pay attention to that, and she was like, hi, my name's Mary Curtis. Where are you from? And I was like, New York. I think it threw her a little bit. But, I found people that I really enjoyed there, and some were from the South, some were from the Northeast. It got me out of my bubble a little bit, which is always important, I think. Yeah.
That's great. And so you're there 4 years. You studied art history and...
I did art history, and my junior year I lived in Florence and got to sort of just all of the amazing museums, and Florence itself is like a museum, so I really dug into Italian Renaissance art. That was my field.
Wow. So you spent a year in Florence. That sounds like a great place to dig into Italian Renaissance art.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was
I was
fantastic.
in Florence for a few days once. It was just so gorgeous.
Yeah. And it was with the Middlebury and Smith College program. So it was like right in the city. I could see the Duomo from my classroom.
Did they have dorms
fantastic.
there that you lived in?
No, they dropped us into Florence and made us use our very new Italian skills to find a place to live. So we had to make phone calls. We had to look in the newspaper, good old
the Village Voice of
classified,
Florence. Yeah.
Exactly, and call people on the phone and try to speak to these old ladies who were renting
crappy
apartments.
Italian.
Yeah, I was like, sono una studentessa, just totally nervous,
Wait,
voice
say that
shaking.
again?
No, I'm not saying that again. Sorry.
But you're probably saying it now as you did back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing that once you were fluent, now it's rusty.
It's a little rusty, although, we went to I get to go to the Venice Biennale for work, which is quite lovely.
No.
And I was there in 2019, and because I brought my family that time, I stayed for a little bit longer. And by the end, by day 8, I felt really good about my Italian again. It was pretty good.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So it just sounds like such a transformative experience for a kid that age.
It was amazing.
And so you knew you were interested in Italian Renaissance art before you went there.
Yeah.
And that just solidified it.
Absolutely. I just kind of cracked open that art history book and fell deeper in love.
And who were some of the superstars of that era for you?
Of the Italian Renaissance?
Yeah.
Well, I did my thesis on Donatello.
Uh-huh.
So he did this amazing sort of...
He's the turtle with the mask and the sword, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. But the piece that I wrote about was this baptistry font in Siena. And it was very rare that people could actually see it in person. But all of our professors were Florentine. And she had all these connections, and she let us go and see it in person.
Well, you said baptismal font?
Yes.
So it's like a bird bath with water in it for baptizing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Exactly. But it has a relief sculpture on the front of it. And Donatello did it. And it was fascinating to me.
Huh.
Yeah.
How exciting. I never studied art history, so it's all sort of
That's interesting.
new to me.
It's good. You don't know the history, but you're an artist in the 21st century.
Yeah. It'd be nice to know all the history, but that was not the path that got me here.
Yeah.
So you finished your junior year, and I'm guessing sadly had to return back to the U.S.
Yeah, I almost transferred to Middlebury at that point, but still the cold kept me away. So I stayed at Richmond for that last year.
Funny, the cold. And then you went to graduate school somewhere?
Well, there was some in-between years that were actually really formative. So after I graduated from Richmond, I moved to Washington, D.C. And again, with the classifieds, I circled at some job at a federal agency that I hadn't even known about before.
And you called them up in your pidgin Italian.
No, this guy, I got to speak English in my interview,
good.
which was very helpful. And it was, I know you know a lot about this. It was for the National Endowment for the Arts.
Oh,
and guess
no.
What
year?
1989.
Oh, nice. That's a good year.
The Mapplethorpe year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had this crash course in the politics of culture.
But the NAA4 was somewhere right around there as well, right?
91. So I was still there.
Oh, geez.
I just was thrown into it.
So for people listening who maybe were not alive at that point or don't remember,
Yeah.
what was the Mapplethorpe controversy and what was the NEA for?
Yeah, so the National Endowment for the Arts, the NEA, and also the NEH, which is for humanities, were these federal agencies that were very well funded, starting in the mid-'60s, that were meant to basically give cultural organizations money, federal money, to do things like exhibitions. So museums relied on these monies mostly as starter money to do exhibitions, to conserve artworks, to hire people. It was really important funding. And I worked for the museum program, and they would give money to exhibitions. And they gave some to an exhibition with Robert Mapplethorpe's photographs. And he's a photographer who died of AIDS, and his work was often very beautiful, like things like pictures of calla lilies and portraits. But he had one body of work that was called the X Portfolio, which really drew on his life as a gay man. And some of the pictures were deemed as pornographic. And Jesse Helms, who was a congressman on the Hill at the time, objected to these works and called them blasphemous, and decided that the money should be taken away and the exhibition should be closed. And then later, the director of the Cincinnati Museum was actually sued for pornography.
Dennis Berry. Yeah.
So all of that was part of my sort of education. So I was right there in the thick of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
But, in retrospect, what an amazing time
Yeah.
to be at the NEA.
For sure.
And so did they take the money away from the Mapplethorpe shows? It was a traveling exhibition, right?
Yeah, they did. And the Corcoran, which was right in D.C., closed the show.
Right.
And that was disappointing because I think people were then really interested. They wanted to see it, but they weren't able to.
But the show traveled to a bunch of other places,
Yeah.
including Cincinnati. And I saw it years later in New Zealand.
Oh,
where,
nice.
Yeah, I know, nice. Where they had a strict rule. Nobody under 18 could be admitted. And while we were there in New Zealand, some new parents tried to go in with their 3-month-old baby in this sort of snuggly. And the guards were like, no, that kid is totally not 18,
Not 18
so
yet.
can't go in. And so there
Even
was
though
a
it's asleep.
big hoo-ha about the ridiculousness of that. Mm-hmm. But there were images in that show, in the X portfolio, that were just made me cringe.
It's intense material, for sure. No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that really I learned, though, was that museums often give artists the freedom to make whatever they want to make. So the seed money will be to put Mapplethorpe in a show. And, well, let's say the seed money is to put Norm Magnusson in a show.
Okay.
A living
I
artist.
like where this is going. Let's keep exploring this.
Okay. But a living artist maybe doesn't know exactly what they're going to make yet.
Right.
So they've said, I would like to contribute a new piece. Maybe it's a new commission.
Right.
They don't know exactly what they're going to put in. You might submit slides of representative work, and they look at it and say, Norm's a really good artist. Let's fund this exhibition. And then later on, you decide, I'm going to put different work, brand new work in it, and it hasn't been vetted by this agency. And that's where the rub happened. So what they ended up doing is canceling all grants to make new art. You could only use art that had already been seen and vetted, and they made that change at that time.
I'm not sure I remember that. That's
yeah. They also cut the budget in half, and it's never grown since then.
And so, how did you feel about this new rule? It's like, no, we're not just letting you surprise us with art. We needs to already exist, so we know what's going to be in the show. How did you feel about that?
Well, a whole section of what we did had to shut down because we used to give money directly to artists.
Right.
And so we had to reorganize.
I'm sure I applied back in the day.
And I probably saw your name and your application.
No, not that guy.
But yeah, so it was difficult because it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it felt like it was an intrusion that was unnecessary. Yeah.
Right. Huh. So let me just jump ahead now. I mean, you are you're not the director. What's your title?
I'm deputy director and curator.
Deputy director and curator at the
Yeah.
Francis Lehman Loeb Art Center at Vassar College.
Yeah.
And, what kind of vetting goes on when you have shows there? I mean, I know you have a lot of historical shows, but you have shows of contemporary art as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever come up against stuff like that where you're like, oh, geez, we can't?
We don't really. I mean, if you think about who our audience is, it's a lot of college students, and there's a lot of openness to many different forms of art. I think what we're battling against now, or I wouldn't even call it a battle, I would just say there's a sort of, it's on our minds, is the fact that museums have developed their collections through a kind of imperialist and colonial impulse. Most of them, including the Loeb. So most of our viewers, especially the people on campus, are really interested in seeing another kind of conversation, a different form of narrative that's maybe not that dominant narrative. And so what we want to do is sort of be more inclusive in who we show and where we get that art.
Right.
So, and we've done something sort of similar or sort of different than what we used to do. We used to do a long-term strategic plan, and this time we wrote an impact plan. So an impact plan differs in that we look at what kinds of impact we can have on our audience, and impact is simply defined as a positive effect on somebody who comes to see us, and these individual outcomes. What are our goals in that area? And then we let that sort of drive the rest of our planning. So we're really thinking about the audience first, a little bit less than the art first.
And so you're thinking, I guess, about the audience and the impact that different shows are going to have.
Yeah. So I know you've done this program with Culture Connect that brings students to museums, and you've brought your students, some of the middle school Rhinebeck kids, and Red Hook, I guess, too, right?
Yeah.
To the museum. And let's say one of our desired outcomes is to have those students feel like they had a positive experience and that now they feel interested and empowered by looking at art. That would be like one of our goals.
Gotcha.
Let's have more teens feel that way when they leave. And then we plan accordingly.
Right. So what percentage, I know you're a collecting museum, what percentage of the shows are brought in from the outside, and what percentage are, and I get part two of this question, just done with work from the permanent collection? And to what degree can you use work from the permanent collection in this sort of, the imperialist or capitalist, I forget what you said, the old patriarchal stuff, and just using that, tell a completely different story?
More and more every day is the answer to that. So we are doing more and more exhibitions from the collection, and the collection reflects these sort of other ideals more and more every day because we're growing the collection. We're adding things to the collection that are sort of bringing in other voices, more diverse voices into that conversation.
Okay.
So and then they'll be in conversation with the things that we've collected over the last 150 years.
Which is great.
And then we're talking about history and how that sort of informs today, and then it's a real educational experience.
Yeah, and history is, it's not a static thing. It's always evolving as people come to understand more clearly what actually happened in the past and what is not being told and what should be told.
Yeah, and I think, I love that you do those field trips because field trips are an example of experiential learning.
Right.
And those kids are likely going to remember that trip more than they will the day after day, same thing that happens in their classroom, right? It's because they've experienced it. Their whole body was standing in a different space than they do when they're sitting in their chair. So just kind of going back to what I was talking about with what the Rhinebeck School District is trying to do, it is this idea of maybe changing up the format, having a lounge, having kids work together. Those kinds of things, I think, are really what we try to do at the Loeb, which is to provide these experiences that are memorable, that are engaging, and that kind of really bring the whole person to the learning.
Right.
And I feel like that's an effective way to learn.
It's the best. It's so good.
Right?
Yeah. So that's real sort of like director overview, mastermind stuff. But you're also a curator, which is more sort of down in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I saw a show you curated, though. I think it was Warhol Photos.
Yes. Yeah.
Such a great show.
And guess what? Those were all from our collection.
Amazing.
The Loeb
nice
owns all
collection.
The Warhol Foundation donated those to 183 academic museums across the country for the 20th anniversary of his death.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah. It was tons and tons of photos.
I was at the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh last year.
Cool.
And it's like, I don't know, 4 floors or something. But every floor outside of the elevator, there was a piece for like a sculpture sort of about Warhol for the blind. So you could
I love it.
feel an art thing, and there was Braille next to it. And it was so...
That is so cool.
I'd seen most of the work before, but that was the thing. I'm like, oh my God, it just really stuck with me. So impressive.
Yeah, we're doing something similar. This summer we have a whole student program actually called Disability Arts. And we're going to look at people who are hearing impaired, seeing impaired, who might be in a wheelchair or a scooter, and they're going to experience our museum so differently than maybe you and I would.
Yeah.
And so they do something called a body slam. I never heard of this, but you go into a museum, sort of imagining yourself with one of these different abilities, and they use that to basically understand how it might feel to go to our museum with as a differently abled person. And we'll see what we're missing and what we could do. We might do something similar to what the Warhol Museum did.
That sounds amazing. And how far out is that being planned?
So that's part of this big initiative across museums that are really trying to do more to, sort of prevent ableism in the museum world.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is...
years, I guess. We'll be working on it for years, likely.
Which is just amazing. And one of the things I really like in our culture and here in America is museums and art institutions have been doing a great job, as far as I've seen, leading diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
Yeah, it's a big priority. And it's an important one. So I'm happy to hear you say that you've noticed that museums are out there doing their best. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, artists are not usually, when you organize artists protesting, you're going to hear them.
Yes.
And actually, the show, one of the shows I saw that I brought the kids to last fall, I was just delighted. At the end of it, there was a whole bunch of work by the Gorilla Girls.
Oh, great. I just had the pleasure of adding everything the Gorilla Girls have ever made to our collection. We bought one of everything.
Amazing. And again, that was the time, 1989, 91,
yeah.
Of the Mapplethorpe thing, and the NEA4. What was, refresh my memory, who were those people?
Oh, I don't know if I can remember all of their names. Karen Finley, I know specifically because she and I met many times.
She's amazing.
She's the one I have the most memory of.
Was Serrano in that?
He might have been, but it's interesting. We also recently purchased some work by Serrano. These portraits that he did with inner city kids. They're Polaroids, which is a love of mine. The Polaroid format. They're big 20 by 24 portraits of inner city kids, just photographed as they want to be. And it's like a triptych. It's a really nice piece.
Well, I've never seen that body work. That sounds nice. It reminds me, I was at an art opening last night and I met the guy who's an art teacher up there at Astor.
Nice.
And he brought up Tim Rollins. And
oh, yeah.
KOS,
he does great stuff with kids.
Who I hadn't thought of forever.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, artists have always been interested in working with kids. And I think that's another way in which the art world is sort of under-recognized, maybe. People think of it as like, oh, it's about Sotheby's and paying billions of dollars for a Picasso and stuff like that. But there's there's so much more to the art world that's much more community oriented. Yeah.
You know, and why do you think that is, that artists are so attracted to working with kids? I mean, I know I am. I never really questioned why. I'm just like, whatever.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm also really interested in self-taught art. And I think there's something about self-taught art that people always say, oh, it looks just like kids' art. But I think that's because they haven't been there's too much training is sometimes not a great thing, right? When it comes to art. If you get that sort of raw energy of a kid before somebody told them that they weren't a good artist,
right?
That's a really nice moment where you can really tap into that early creativity that we all have, but somehow we get busy and we lose it as we get older or something.
Yeah, and some people call that self-taught art, or outsider art. And I never went to art school, so I sort of got lumped in there for a while. I'm like, well, I'm not. I live in New York City. I go to all the museums and galleries.
Yeah.
And I subscribe to all the art magazines. I'm just not. And this guy, this must be like late 80s, he was the director of the Newark Art Museum, defined outsider art as artists creating in aesthetic isolation.
Oh, interesting.
I'm like, oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't include me.
Right. And some people define it as like outside of the academy.
Yeah. Which does include me, but
yeah, that's a much
still
broader. I think of it as like tiers, like self-taught art, and then outsider art is under that one.
I love so much of that stuff.
Me too.
And used to go to the outsider art fair all the time.
I just went.
You did?
Yeah, it was in February.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And did you see new stuff?
It was a little bit smaller this year, I think, because there weren't as many like international galleries there.
Right.
But it was good. Yeah, I saw some good
Sometimes it's
stuff.
hard for me anyway to believe the new stuff as something that's really genuinely springing forth from the aesthetic isolation of an artistic soul.
Yeah.
And not just like, oh, I'm going to paint a blue dog and it'll look kind of sloppy. And
Yeah, I think Jerry Saltz, the
love him so much.
New York Magazine art critic, said that a lot of contemporary artists are making work that looks outsidery.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and there in the outside art fair, even back in the 80s, there was still stuff. I'm like, okay, that's outsider-y, outsider-esque. But then the stuff like Henry Darger, I liked.
Yes.
Some of the subject matter was a little bit tough, but just
I did a solo show actually for this African American artist named Inez Nathaniel Walker. And in 1970, she was incarcerated for murdering her abuser. And while she was imprisoned, she wasn't working in a factory. She had all this free time, and she started making art. She started making portraits of what she called the bad girls, the other women who were incarcerated there with her. And then she was released from prison about 2 years later. They had much more lenient sentences for self-defense back then. And she then just became an artist and stayed an artist for the rest of her life.
wow.
Yeah.
And that show was at the Lehman Loeb?
Yeah. Yep.
And you curated it?
I did. And I did a little book, the first ever book published on this person.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And you've done other books as well, haven't you?
I have.
I've found one
Publishing
online.
is a big part of what we do at the museum. Yeah.
Because you're not just at the museum, you're at the university, and so you're still in sort of academia. And
Yeah, we hope that our projects are making a scholarly contribution to what's happening in the art world and in the field.
But is that sort of expected?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
They don't let you forget that you're in academia.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, like the director, your counterpart at, say, MoMA, is, I'm going to guess, not expected to publish books and stuff.
Yes and no. I mean, for them, it's for a different reason. They publish books because they have a sort of imperative to, bring in revenue. And those books are expensive. So... different
Interesting.
a different reason why they're publishing.
So Vassar doesn't publish the books. They don't have a publishing
We
place.
sometimes do self-publish, but the next 3 books that I'm doing with Scala in London.
Oh God, the next 3 books. All right, what are they? I'm tired just thinking about that.
So one of them is my colleague that I recently hired Jess Breyer. Maybe she's listening. Hi, Jess. She's doing a really great exhibition that's coming up this fall called On the Grid, Ways of Seeing in Print. And it's a fantastic exhibition, all from our collection, by the way, of photography and prints and the sort of overlap with those two mediums, because, of course, photos are prints.
Yeah.
And she, for her dissertation, wrote a lot about the halftone and how that sort of really changed our understanding and our experience with photographs when they're printed in a book.
Right.
So that's called On the Grid, and Scala just signed on to that, and we just sent out the manuscript, so that's ready to go.
Congratulations, Jess.
Thank you. Yes, and to Jess especially.
Okay.
And then right after that, we're doing a big collection highlights catalog. So, we have 22,000 objects.
Egads.
It's a lot, and so we can't put them all in the book, but we've selected works that we think will be the most informative and the most, the things that we find to be the most important right now. So that book is going to be a Scala publication. And then Jess Breyer and I together are co-organizing an exhibition, again, on an under-recognized female artist. Her name is Raleigh McKenna, and she actually graduated from Vassar in 1940.
Oh, cool.
And no one really knows who she is. So we're going to change that.
And so I'm guessing tracking down all of the pieces for that show must have been sort of a challenge.
Yes.
Or continues to be a challenge.
Happily, we think we're the largest repository for her work. We have 180 some odd works in our collection, but we're taking a trip to Tucson, Arizona, where they have an archive of her work. We went to the Connecticut Historical Society recently. So yeah, that's part of the curator's job, is to really track all of the objects and where they are.
A lot of grunt work.
Yep. Research, we call it.
Research. You're not allowed to call it grunt work.
I mean, of course.
Yeah.
We do when no one's listening.
And so Tucson, did she move from here to Tucson?
No, there's a really great archive there called Center for Creative Photography.
Okay.
It's part of the University of Arizona.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see all this stuff.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So, yeah. So before you moved here, you were doing museum stuff in California?
Yeah, pretty much. So I did my graduate degree at USC, and then I worked for UCLA after that. So I went from what was the Campus Art Gallery, the White Gallery, to the Hammer Museum, which maybe you've heard of. It's a very hip contemporary museum, and I was the assistant curator there. And then I kind of wanted to have my own program, and so I moved to a museum in Long Beach at Cal State Long Beach. But all these different museums I've worked at have always been on college or university campuses.
What does that mean, have your own program?
I wanted to be in charge of what exhibitions happened.
Okay.
Whereas when I was at the Hammer, I was the assistant, so I was working on other people's shows.
So
learning the ropes.
And so now you are in charge of your own program.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're called the deputy director.
Yep.
But if you're in charge, I'm guessing there's no sort of like over director.
There is an over director.
Oh. Who we love.
Yes, of course.
Wonderful. She's the best.
He's a he.
Who's the over director?
His name is Bart Thurber.
Uh-huh.
Yep. He started it in 2019.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So I'm even going to ask what's next for you, because it sounds like you're very happy there.
Yeah, I am. I mean, working at Vassar has been so much a part of my life in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's a lot of Rhinebeck people who work at Vassar. So that community that I feel, that community tight-knit feeling that I feel here kind of extends to my life at work too, which is really nice. Right.
You must know right around the corner from you, Leonard Navarez, who works down there.
Exactly. Lots of Rhinebeck people. So Lisa Brawley and Sam Spears, who live on South Street, on your street, they work there. And there's, lots of people.
That's nice. How long is the commute?
It's 18 miles from my house. It takes about a half hour.
Okay.
Not bad.
That's not so bad.
No, it's way worse when I was living in LA and driving to Long Beach.
And it's a beautiful campus, and the museum's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So not too shabby. All right, so I want to ask about, you know what, I'll ask this. Who are some of your favorite artists? Now, let me rephrase that. What is some of the art that you've seen over the course of your life that changed the way you see the world around you?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question. You didn't want to give me that one in advance so I could think about it?
No, but I'll answer while you're mulling over mine. There's this guy, Jacques Villeglet and Raymond Hain, and they were sort of Dadaists who were doing this thing called décollage, unpasting, and they would sort of excavate these sort of abstract masterpieces out of the layers and layers of wheat pasted posters around Paris and Rome and stuff. And like when I saw that, I was like, what? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Andy Goldsworthy.
Oh, yes.
When I first saw that, I was like, swear to God, I was traveling to New Zealand, and we had stopped in Tokyo on the way. And there was a bookstore, and it had this huge coffee table book for like $1 million. And it was my first exposure to Andy Goldsworthy. I'm like, I don't care if I'm starting the trip and I don't have $1 million. I got to have this book, because it totally blew my mind.
Yeah.
Let me think who else. Dave Brubeck.
Oh,
when
wow.
I first heard the Dave Brubeck Quartet, my dad had Time Out, that record, like total.
Of course.
I was like, what is that?
That's cool.
I'd never heard anything like it. It totally changed the way I thought about, musical art anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay. So the question is not my favorite artist, because that's way too hard, because there's just a million. I like so much art, and I will go to galleries and museums with people, and I fall in love with like most of what I see. And I always say I like more contemporary art than most people, which is good because it's my job too. But I will tell you a couple of sort of formative moments. So again, back to my NEA days, one of the things we would do is we would like really look over the exhibition proposals that other museums would have that they would need money for. And I was still kind of in the Italian Renaissance world. I hadn't quite discovered that I wanted to go into contemporary art, but this was the turning point. So several of the applications were for site-specific installations / performance pieces by Anne Hamilton. And I was amazed. I was like, oh, an artwork can be a whole period in which women are sitting at a table making something, and then the thing that they produce becomes the art. Like, it just kind of blew my mind.
Right.
I had thought of art as like, the static marble thing that Donatello made in the, 14th century. It was a totally different concept. So that blew my mind. And
describe for people listening more what she does. And she represented the Biennale one year, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so it's hard to kind of pin her down, but remember I was talking about like experiential learning. I think every time you look at Anne Hamilton's work, you're not just looking, you're experiencing. You're stepping into a zone or a space that she's sort of custom made for her viewers to be part of. And the piece really isn't complete until the audience interacts with it. And that was the shift that I was fascinated by.
And why is it not complete without the audience? What was the audience doing apart from looking at Donatello?
Yeah.
Regarding that, what was the audience doing differently seeing the Anne Hamilton stuff that made that an integral part of the completion of the work?
Yeah, I mean, the viewers meant to move around and interact and become part of the piece. Maybe they sit down at a table and they make things, and they're asked to kind of really participate, use their hands, not just their eyes. I think we were talking a little bit before about this idea that you can feel an artwork and it's a totally different experience than just looking. And I think that if you're thinking about a Renaissance piece, that was very much sort of privileged vision as the one way that one experiences a work of art. And this work kind of takes that emphasis off of vision being the only avenue towards an experience with art.
Sounds amazing. And we're out of time. Will you come back and talk art with me again someday?
Anytime.
I would love that so much. And I just want to say again, this Monday is the Meet the Candidates thing.
That is correct. 7 o'clock in the library.
And then
so
before I ask you about the election, I want to say this. School board candidates often win by a margin of just a few votes. So it's really, really important for everybody to get out and support you and Juliet Gorman and Steve Jenkins. And when you vote, you can vote for 3 candidates.
Yeah. Everyone can vote up to 3 candidates. I think that if you don't vote, you might be really disappointed the next morning when you realize that someone who you thought you were for and you forgot to vote didn't win. So
this is why I vote, so I have the right to complain later. All right, Mary Kay Lombino, good luck in the election. I hope you all win. And thank you so much for being here. Everybody have a great Friday. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. This is so fun.
The best.
Bye.